Now we're recording. Okay. I'll do it again. This is the Gilroy Unified School District Board of Trustees meeting. I assume that you are all here for that meeting. And ¿hay alguien aquí que necesita intérprete? Gracias. No? Okay. Go ahead. She's got it. Okay. All set. Great. Okay. So we will start tonight's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance with Rucker Elementary School, Jean Wells Southland, principal. Nice shirts.
You look great. Look at that. Wow.
I know you get 2 rounds with me today.
Lucky us. That's cool.
I know. Lucky me that I get to introduce this amazing group of our student leadership, who we just kind of formed our new leadership committee and team a few weeks ago. And we have an amazing student leadership leader, Nikki Estacio, who I've known for quite a long time. She was actually a student teacher in my 6th grade classroom like 10 or 15 years ago. So it's nice that I get to work with her again. And she took this on as a new teacher last year, and it's just grown, and they've done really wonderful things. And as you can see on their shirts, it's really about being very inclusive and making the school a kinder place to be. And behind is my amazing literacy facilitator, who is also helping behind the scenes in pretty much everything at this point. So we'll turn it over to them.
Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now for the Rockaway Pledge.
I will be safe, I will be courteous, I will do my personal best.
Thank you. Nicely done. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you. Okay, board members, I need approval of agenda.
I believe there's been a couple items pulled off consent agenda,
There are.
6H and I.
Thank you for reminding me. Yes, staff is requesting that we pull 6H and 6I, and we'll bring it back at the next meeting.
So I'd move approval with those 2 items removed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And now we have recognition.
We're going to be recognizing a group of students from Christopher High tonight, so we'll do the student recognitions first, and then we're going to be recognizing a very special group of parents. So we'll do the student recognitions first, and as you know, board members know this because we've been doing this over a series of meetings. We've been recognizing all of our students in the district who scored the highest possible score on the CASP, which is our state test. So we're really pleased tonight to be able to recognize the Christopher High students who received the highest possible score. And for you, if you don't know what the CASP is, it's the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. And students were tested in ELA, English Language Arts, and Math. And there are 31 students being recognized tonight from Christopher. Isn't that amazing? That's great. So we're in the 4th year of CASP testing, and just a brief statement about CASP. It's an assessment that requires students to explain how they solve problems, think critically, and write analytically. I've seen these assessments, and they are very, very difficult at the high school level. So for students to score at this level is just really remarkable. We have 85 students in the district that received the highest possible score on the English Language Arts section of the test, and 54 students who scored in math. And we have 28 students in our district who achieved the highest possible score on both tests. That's really remarkable. And 3 of those are from Christopher. So this is a wonderful accomplishment to be celebrated. So I'm going to ask Principal Jeremy Dirks to come forward. He's going to read off the names. And before we call up the students, I just want to acknowledge all the parents, family members, and friends who are here this evening, because for students to score at this level, they have to have an incredible support team behind them that have been supporting them since they entered school. So I want to thank you all for everything you've done to support your students to reach this accomplishment. And so I'll ask Jeremy to call up the names.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I'll begin with our 8th grade students. Actually, they're freshman students now that scored high on the English language arts. Tiara Nidjo, Ella Rodriguez. Oops, that's okay.
Okay. Well, yes, we are.
Are we
All
in
right.
order?
Tiara.
Yes.
I believe Tiara and Ella are not here.
Okay.
So only read. Okay. Shireen Alali from Solar's Honor Middle School.
Okay.
Shireen Alali. English language arts. Itzel. The next group will be from our mathematics group that are freshmen now.
Mathematics.
Itzel, carry on. She's next.
So here we go.
Itzel? Not here. Aaron James. I know Aaron's here. There we go. Alexis Kong.
Congratulations. We're very proud of her. Great. Congratulations.
Luke Sutter. All right. So those conclude our students that had the very high score in mathematics. Next, we'll begin with our students from our middle schools that have both English language arts and mathematics scores. All right. And they're all from Brownell. Victor Chen. Victor's our only one in attendance, and many of our students have other activities tonight. We have various activities. High school's a busy time, and so a lot of them are out right now. All right, I'll begin with our 11th graders last year, now our 12th graders. These students all performed in English language arts. Kirsten Alfred Chavez. James Collins. Nicholas Eden. Claire Hansen. Sabrina Kang. Niet Kay. Matthew Ogden. Madison Owens. John Perales Jr. Leticia Rodriguez Verruta. Petra Rotman. Audra Rubio. Emily Cerna. And last but not least, Hannah Underwood.
So stay up here. We're going to do a picture in a minute, but we're going to recognize a few more. What? Who? Oh, so we have 2 of each? Okay, great.
We're going to get this picture.
So let's do this picture first, and then we're going to do National Merit Scholars next. So let's do this picture, and then we'll do it. Jeremy?
Yep.
Okay, you guys, wait.
squish together. 12th graders in the back row. Squish, please.
Are you going to be able to do it?
Okay, everybody. So I'm going to take a couple pictures with this camera, a couple pictures with my phone, and then your moms and dads can take all the pictures that they want. Let me first, okay?
Can we turn off the light that's reflecting on that student's face? It looks like his Halloween makeup. Whoa.
That's right. You just need a black image.
Oh, well.
It is. We just got to do it.
Maybe
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Hold on. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Okay, now parents. All right. Good. All right. Thank you. Thank you, students. We're very proud of you. You've done a great job. So we have 2 from Gecko?
Yeah, everybody's built into the same script.
Okay.
She's the only one.
Disperse?
Yes.
They can go.
This Christopher student is the National Merit Scholar.
Way to go, students.
All right.
It was great to see you.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Oh, didn't get it to read it.
Good job.
All right.
Good job, you guys. Good to see you.
So cool.
Okay.
Do we have anything to hand out?
Yeah, we were busy. So you know what we have to do in the future? We have to take out the ones that are not here. He still wanted to call out the names? Oh. Oh well. All right, now we're going to recognize some more exceptional students. So throughout the year, as you know, we recognize students for various honors. Tonight we're pleased to recognize Christopher High School student who has received a tremendous honor in addition to attaining the highest possible score on the CASP. I hope she's still here. Good. She's been named as a commended student in the National Merit Scholarship Program. And the National Merit Scholarship Program honors individual students across the country who demonstrate exceptional academic ability and potential for success in a rigorous college study. About 1.6 million juniors in the United States entered the 2019 National Merit Scholarship Program by taking the 2017 PSAT. And the nationwide pool of commended students represents less than 1% of U.S. high school seniors. So that's quite an accomplishment. That's amazing, out of hundreds of thousands of students. To receive this honor, the students have to score in the top 2/3 of the high scorers on the PSAT. As you can see, to be recognized by the National Merit Scholarship Program, it's an incredible accomplishment, and we're here to recognize, I know I'm not going to do this right, Niyat K. as a National Merit Commended Scholar. And we're very proud of you.
Great job. Great job.
Wait for her dad, it looks like.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Well
Thanks.
done.
Very well done. And also tonight, we're going to recognize 3 students who have been named National Hispanic Recognition Scholars. Every year, the College Board recognizes about 5,000 of the 250,000 Hispanic Latino juniors who take the PSAT. These students represent the top 2.5% of Hispanic and Latino test takers in the nation. Tonight, we're going to recognize 3 students who have achieved this honor. Alan Castillo from GECA, Anthony Sainez from GECA, and Matthew Ogden from Christopher High School.
Great job. Congratulations, Matthew. Great job. We're very proud of all 3 of you.
All of those photos.
All right, let's get in. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Thank you.
That's great. Congratulations. One more.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Tonight we're going to recognize some incredible parents, and because I'm having trouble talking tonight, Kathleen is going to do this honor. I'm sorry, I can hardly talk. So Kathleen's going to do this honor. We're of course going to be up here to help give out some special plaques to our DLAC parents who planned our parent conference this year, and I was there. It was amazing. You guys did such an incredible job. So Kathleen's going to take over.
Good evening. I would like our parent leaders to please come forward. And so while I acknowledge the wonderful work they did, we do have one person, Sarah, who could not attend this evening, but we still will recognize her. So I wanted to say a little bit about this group of people because they're amazing. It's really my honor to recognize this group of parent leaders. They did support this year's DLAC, or District English Learner Advisory Committee's parent conference on October 13th at South Valley Middle School. And so I want to give you a little history. Back in the spring, several of these parents came to me about some new ideas for Parent University, and they said they would like to hold it in the fall. And I have to admit, I had some trepidation about that. I've been involved with Parent University for the past 8 years, and I know it's a tremendous undertaking. We have a lot of planning to do, and it is done by the DLAC representatives. We elect those representatives in late September or early October. So my trepidation was about how am I going to do this because I won't have my team of representatives in place. So this group told me not to worry, that they would take the lead and it wouldn't be a problem. So I said, okay, and in reality, they did that and then some. So I trusted them and they came through with amazing ways. So this initiative, commitment, and leadership is unparalleled, really, with this group of parents. I have to say they are incredible examples for others. They motivated and encouraged us all, and they took care of all the details. Together we worked, even throughout the summer, holding meetings, worked on all of the details from getting donations to the program, to looking at logistics, to recommending our keynote speaker, decorating the event, every piece of that. What I do want to particularly point out, though, were the efforts that they did to reach out to the community. We can certainly do, and we do try, to send auto dialers and notices and all of those things. But it is not the same as having parent to parent, of going from school to school and talking to parents at the entrance to the school, of going out to the church and the community and getting flyers handed out, of going to businesses and talking it up, of going to newspapers. So these people were relentless. And because of that, we had a very successful event, and it was enthusiastically received by our parents. So I feel that, as a district, we work very hard. Every site leader, all of the district worked hard on parent involvement. It's one of our LCAP goals under Goal 3 about having a positive school climate, and under that, it's about having parent involvement, increased parent involvement. It's one of our key actions. But I have to tell you, this is increasing parent involvement in action on the part of these parent leaders. And it tells me that the partnership with parents is essential to create that feeling of community, to just suggest that they are actually the ones that are helping us realize this goal. And not only that, but they're having an impact in supporting other families as well, through their modeling, their example, their enthusiasm, right, and their tireless efforts. So I am so pleased that I had an honor that I had the opportunity to work with them this year in our parent conference.
Thanks, Kathleen. And we have something for each of you. So, Tina? Thank you so much. You guys did a great job. I thoroughly enjoyed the conference. It was beautiful. All those balloons and decorations. It was great.
Adriana.
And Adriana, thank you so much. You did a great job.
Alma.
Alma? Thank you. Wonderful job.
Tadeo.
Am I going to say it right? Centennial? Oh, sorry.
Centennial.
Thank you so much.
Maricela.
Maricela. Thank you. We really appreciate it. You did a great job, and I would echo everything Kathleen just said.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I just wanted to add one more thing about Maricela Mendez. I do want to especially acknowledge her. She's been to every parent university and helped at every parent university. She is our DLAC president and has gone from being a participant to a mentor and a leader. I'm very grateful for her support.
Great. Thank you so much. Can I say it? Or you have to say it in the
In microphone, Tina.
Oh, microphone. I wrote it down because I knew I was going to forget. But I can't find my notes. Okay.
We as mothers of children in the district, we want to thank you, board members, and Ms. Bierman, and everyone else who supported our event and who was there from beginning to end. Superintendent Flores, thank you to everyone for your vision and for being a voice for us parents and students as well. Your countless hours of your dedication here, it doesn't go unnoticed. We understand and appreciate your commitment to our community, to our schools. We also appreciate that you support an event like the one we did. And this only gives us more strength and more, how would you say it, encouragement that we are supported, and therefore we're going to go forward. And next year is going to be even better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lucy, do we have any cards? Oh, you have it.
Hello.
Good, Mr.
All right, is that where we are?
Yes. We are now at 4D, public comment.
We have some public comments.
We have some public. On 6G.
6G. G.
Oh, it's about the,
G. Okay. That concludes public comment.
Okay, so we'll get to that before we, okay. So now, just trying to figure out what I'm doing here. Thank you. There was no report. There was no action taken in closed session. And now we have the Student Board Representatives Report. Daisy Sarate Osorio, Dr. T.J. Owens, Gilroy Early College Academy.
It's fine, I'll just use it. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board. I am Daisy Zarate, and today I will be presenting on Dr. T.J. Owens Gilroy Early College Academy as well as Rod Kelly Elementary School. So back in October, we had the Gala Health Fair, the CSU and B field trip, the PCAT/the SAT, Spirit Days, College Day, and the Halloween dance. So the Gala Health Fair was held on October 3rd, and it was held up at Abilene College, but it was available to GECA students, so we were able to go up there and get free health screenings, learn about available community health resources, as well as internships that were available with community experts. And the CSU and V field trip also took place back in October, and it was a good way to allow the students to explore the campus and learn about possible majors, as well as get a feel for the community, because that's not online, well, it might be, but just going in person really does give you that sense of, oh, what does this environment feel like? Am I going to thrive here, or would it be better to look somewhere else? And Spirit Days took place on the 22nd and the 26th of October, and since it is October and it's spooky season, then we had Magic Monday, Evil Twin Tuesday, Orange for Anti-Bullying Day, Tacky Tourist Thursday, and Zombie vs. Vampires. And our anti-bullying assembly was held on Wednesday, October 24th, and this was presented by ASB. And we had activities last year. I'm not sure if you guys remember, we had a presentation where we had students kind of like raise the lights of their phones if they were ever bullied, and that was a nice activity. This year, we came up with an idea of making posters of just body shapes and having the students write a positive comment about themselves or a positive comment about the person next to them. And a lot of the people actually wrote both things, and that was really cool to see. And we just have those kind of held around in our school, and it's really nice to just go and check out everybody's kind of feelings towards one another and themselves too. And College Day was also held in October, and this is where various colleges came up to the Gavilan campus, and they kind of set up their booths, and students could go and check out information on just kind of the majors they have, also what type of financial aid they offer, and it was just really nice, especially since seniors sometimes are not really sure yet still where to apply, or maybe they could find new colleges where they could go to. And it's also really good for the juniors and the sophomores, since they will be applying to colleges pretty soon. And the middle school visits were held on the 23rd and the 25th of October. And this is where we went to SSN Solorzano, we went to Brownell Middle School, Gilroy Prep, and we also went to South Valley. And we presented on our school. This year, I feel like it was extra successful. I had the opportunity to go, and we added some slides where we clarified misconceptions, because there's a big misconception that GECA is only for the smart kids, and just kind of having that in, I feel like made the students be more inclined to apply to GECA, since we did kind of just mention that and clarify that no, those misconceptions are just that, misconceptions.
And the Halloween dance was held on the 26th of October. Since Halloween did fall on a Wednesday, we couldn't have the Halloween dance in the middle of the week. It'd be kind of awkward. So we had it, it was just a general Halloween theme. And the sophomores were actually in charge of this, and I think they did a great job. We had a lot of freshmen show up, and it was just a really nice way to end kind of October. And looking forward, tomorrow we have Rock the Mock, and for seniors, college applications, a lot of the deadlines are in November, so those are coming up too, and finals are closer than they seem, so we also have that. And moving on to Rod Kelly Elementary, the picture didn't show up. Kind of weird. Okay, so they had their African Library project, and the second graders were they were kind of like looking for donations, and they donated. They managed to acquire 2,000 books. And for those of you who don't know, the African Library project creates libraries with the help of book drives located in the United States. And looking forward. Rod Kelly will be having their parent-teacher conferences on the 27th through the 4th of December, and this will be for kindergartners through 5th grade. And they will also begin selling poinsettias from November 1st through the 16th. So if you guys are in the spirit, you guys should buy some. And their Harvest Festival will be November 2nd, so tomorrow. So there will be games, food, and family fun. So that's also an event you guys should go to. Support Rod Kelly. Okay. That will be it. Sorry. That will be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Daisy. Nicely done. Dr. Flores, do you have enough of a voice to give you a report? You're going to give it a go? Okay.
All right. I'm not going to do it all. Sorry, Melanie. So, as you know, we've been talking about Graduation Alliance, and we had a meeting about a week ago now with representatives from Graduation Alliance. It went very well. I think we've agreed that it's time for us to do our own program, and now we're talking about inventory and how to deal with that. So it was a good meeting. On Monday, October 22nd, a bunch of us attended the Santa Clara County Office of Education teacher recognition event. And so we had, I think, 3 board members there, James, Heather, and Jaime. And, of course, Patricia Mondragon was there to support Rachel. And many members of her family and some of her staff were there. And Alvaro and I attended, of course. It was a wonderful event. I love that event. It's a little long. But it's very nice, very well done.
And Rachel's a second-generation Gilroy Unified School District teacher.
Isn't that amazing? Her mother, who's standing next to her in the picture, taught at South Valley for many years. And, in fact, Rachel moved into her room when she retired. It's a great story.
And her mom also was a teacher of the year.
Yes, oh, that's right. She was a teacher of the year also.
She also was a county teacher.
Very good teacher. I don't get to do this very often, but it was a lot of fun. I got to judge El Roble's Scarecrow Contest, which I've heard about many times but hadn't been. Every single classroom has a scarecrow, and there's 3 criteria that they have to meet for their scarecrow, which one of them is that the kids did it, not adults. But anyway, I had a really tough time choosing 3 from the lower grades and 3 from the upper grades. They were so well done, but that was a lot of fun. And then that same day, I attended the Elliott Elementary Harvest Festival, and Rosa McCann tricked me into being a scary witch. That was fun. But anyway, at this event, which was very well attended by families, it's a great event. All the staff attend, and lots and lots. I mean, it's just a community event. But the staff surprised Patricia by recognizing her while all the families were there. And do we have a picture up on the stage? No. Oh, that's right. My pictures were terrible. Anyway, I did take pictures of this, but they called her up on the stage, and every single staff member gave her a rose. Oh. And she was so touched by that. It was just, and they were all talking about what a great job she's done as principal there. So it was really a nice surprise for her. As you know, we've been talking about the rebuild of the pool at Gilroy High, and there's some questions that we really felt we needed to delve into further. So last Friday, a bunch of us, the 3 board members from the facilities committee, James, Pat, and Linda, Jim Bombachi, who's no longer with us as of tonight, he's retired, Alvaro, myself, and then we invited Bria De Lorenzo, who was here last time, PE teacher at Gilroy High, and it was a very worthwhile visit. I am so glad we visited and saw what a peninsula is, that's what's there on the left, and had PE teachers talking directly to each other and answering our questions. It was very well worth it. I'm definitely sold on the idea of a peninsula. I don't want to ask the 3 board members right now because it will be an agenda item at the next board meeting. South Valley also had their Harvest Festival, so I attended that last Friday. And again, a great event. Tons of people were there. Lots of great performances by students. It was just a wonderful event. Lots of incredible food. On Monday, we had a great shakeout debrief. As you know, on October 18th, we had the great shakeout district-wide, statewide. And we had a debrief, and our debrief was great because, it's not just about an earthquake. It's about what we're going to do if we have an emergency that requires that I open the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, and what each of our roles are. So it was a really good drill, and we're going to do some more. Yesterday was Jim Bombachi's last day. We recognized him at the last board meeting, so we took him out to lunch. And those of you who know him knows he loves hats. So as a spoof, we all wore a hat, and he didn't. That was so funny. He didn't wear his hat. So there were a bunch of us there to recognize Jim on his last day. He's just done a fantastic job. Today was Mock the Rock at Christopher High School. We had about 100 students participate. It was a great event, as always. At Rock the Mock, we have basically 4 rotations for the students. They go to a Dress for Success workshop. They go to a workshop on how to prepare for an interview. They go to a social media workshop that really scares them about what they're posting online because they don't realize it becomes a permanent footprint forever for future employers to look at. And that really got their attention about presenting themselves in a very positive way on social media platforms. And then, of course, the reason it's called Rock the Mock is there's an interview at the end, and Jaime, Mark, and Linda were there today and interviewed, and we had a lot of business people there today. It was great. We probably had about 30 members of our business community doing interviews. And tomorrow, as was already mentioned, we'll have our other 3 high schools at Gilroy High School. We'll be doing Rock the Mock there. I've just finished the middle school visits, and some board members attended with me, Jaime and Linda. I went to South Valley, and they also went to Brownell with me. Nobody showed up at Solorzano. I don't know what happened.
Had no voice.
You couldn't talk. But what's great about when I do these visits, I do it by level. So I do the high schools, elementary, and now middle school. And it's great to see what's happening across the 3 middle schools. And I know Deb visits them all the time, but we're really excited about the level of implementation of our, as you heard now with the elementary principals, but at the middle school, we're definitely seeing really good implementation of our new ELA and math programs and a lot of technology. I mean, I don't have enough time to talk to you about it, but it was really very satisfying to see the level of implementation of our ELA and math programs. We start our APS visits soon, and those are just with our team. And we actually start, I think, in the next week or 2. Tuesday. Oh, Lord. So in the winter, we do our APS visits, which is the whole Ed Services team and and we use an instrument, and we're going to start that next week. And I have tons of meetings every month, and I'm not going to name them all this time. So thank you.
Thank you. And now we have, how many people? 3, 4?
Several.
Several people who would like to address item 6G on the consent agenda. Do you want to do it all together? Thank you, Dr. Booth. Come on down.
Just wondering, did everybody get it?
Yes.
Yeah, we do. Yes.
And my name.
Now, what is that? So we just wanted to give a quick pitch. We're hoping that you've already decided to say yes, but just in case you were still on the fence, I'm Kate Booth. I'm the theater teacher at Christopher. And year before last, you voted yes to let us go. And I just wanted to let you know a few things that came out of that so you can kind of see why it's something we want to continue to do. So when we went, I have to just tell you, you'll be so proud. Everywhere we went, people commented on how well-behaved our students were, how intelligent they were, how interested, how curious, and so much so that when we went to the Moscow Art Theater, they took us beyond the regular tour. We got to see Stanislavski's private dressing room. And we also got to see Nemirovich Danchenko's personal study, and that's not on the tour. But everywhere we went, people said, "Oh, come over, we'll show you this over here." So we got to go over, under, through, and around. It was just absolutely amazing. Since then, we've had one student signed up for Russian. She's now in her second year of Russian at Muhlenberg College. We've got another student who's at Yale, and he's looking into directing and what's the other thing? Dramaturge. Being a dramaturg, maybe. We have a student who in junior high was so fearful of social situations that she did home hospital all through junior high. She's now flying by herself across the country to visit friends from the Russia group that have kind of spread out. We've got one that's been in episodes of 13 Reasons Why as an extra. We've just really seen that the students that have that opportunity have developed just a broader worldview and a more confidence of their place in it and their ability to kind of navigate and make decisions and step out into the unknown. And we really can't underestimate the value of that, because many of these kids were terrified about getting on an airplane, and we were a little nervous too. I mean, taking 15 kids and hopping on and off the tube, but I just have to say that everything that we did was fantastic, and we probably, I'm sure she's going to set up the same kind of thing. We toured about 7 different theaters. We saw the Moscow Circus. We saw the Bolshoi with an opera. We saw a special needs performance with handicapped actors. And we performed for the school. We performed at the festival. We went to classes with the kids. We did everything. We were going. And then 2 shows in London and special workshops at the Globe. And I have to say, just as a teacher, that's the best professional development I've ever had, was our workshop at the Globe, which focused on levels of address in Shakespeare, it was awesome. So anyway, we had the kids here from Russia last year, and they're coming again right before we would go. And we're going to this year incorporate them into our talent show. So we're not performing that until they're here. And then we're hoping, if they can get their visas, that they will join us for the London part of our trip. And then we'll all go over together to Moscow. So it's all good. Everybody had a great time. And the world is now a better place.
Show off your shirt.
Oh, no, they can see it. It's okay. Go ahead.
Beautiful shirt.
Step over.
Hello, my name is Petra. I actually haven't had the chance to go to Russia yet, which is why I'm especially hoping that we do get to go this year. And personally, my grandma and I hosted 2 of the Russians who came over last year, Gleb and Michael, and I really just want to foster the relationship that I started with the both of them, as well as the rest of the Russians who visited us. I keep in contact with them even today over social media, and last year we really built a relationship with each and every one by doing a joint performance, Fahrenheit 451, where they were integrated into our show. And they were given roles, not big ones, albeit, but they were given roles with lines. So that was a really interesting and unique experience, which I hope to maybe replicate in Russia and learn more about their culture, more about how they learn in their school, and get to know them a little bit more.
Hi, I'm Milo Loza, and I went on the trip to Russia 2 years ago, along with most of the seniors and one person that's also my age. And it was really amazing because they got to come here and we became friends with them, and then we got to go over there and hang out with them there and see their school. And it's really amazing to see how their school system works compared to ours. And there was a kid I met named Michael that he knew 5 languages. Me and my friend Grant, we went into the German class, and we met him, and he translated what was going on, the German and Russian for us, and he also knew Japanese, which was really awesome. Spanish. He didn't know Spanish, but it was just awesome to be able to see all that. And during the trip, I felt really safe with everyone. I never was worried about anything. She's Doug Booth and Miss Yoderschlag, who went with us. We always say, all right, we're going to go here. And we had our certain rules that we had to have, and it kept us safe. And I had a lot of fun with it. And I hope I could do it again this year, or this upcoming year. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Hurtado. Dear School Board, it is my honor and pleasure to speak at this meeting. With what little time I have here, I would like to heavily endorse this trip. I would be so pleased to go to Europe and Russia. It is simply a trip my family cannot make happen without this opportunity. This opportunity for me would be great, may help me educate myself in Russian culture and the historical importance of theater. It is simply a magnificent learning experience for me. I can even see an old friend from our program's kids camp. I'd also love to learn the educational process done in Russia. Hopefully I can take what works there and apply it to my own school journey. Sadly, I had more than one F last year, but this trip, in agreement with Kate Booth and Juliana Grant, I have had A's and B's this year. Otherwise, I could not go on the trip. The trip has motivated me to do well in school. I've even been on time at school this year, which was not something I did last year. So now I ask you to please approve this trip. Thank you so much for your time.
Hello, my name is Sierra. Can you guys hear me? Thank you. So my name is Sierra. I just really am enjoyed by the idea of this trip. Every time I think about it, I just get so incredibly happy because one of my best friends, her name is Sonia, she lives in Russia, and I met her when she visited us last year, and she's one of my best friends now. We talk every day over social media, and I'm so overjoyed to just see her again and be able to talk with her and have a great time and learn more about theater. I want to do theater with my life. It is the thing that I am very passionate about. And every time I go to a new place and see how theater is done in that new place, I re-experience that feeling of, I want to do this with my life. This is what I want to do. So I really hope that you accept this trip and give us this opportunity to experience all these new things and new cultures and become better people in the world and inspire other people to go to different countries and experience different cultures. Thank you.
Can I just finish up by saying I want to address the threat level right now. Last time that we went, we signed up with the State Department, and they send you updates to your cell phone, and they tell you things like, hey, there's a demonstration in front of the Kremlin. Don't go to the Kremlin today. And we didn't go, so we were good. We went another day. There was no demonstration. We had a blast. But we all felt like we were well informed, and when we're in Moscow, we travel everywhere on their school bus, so we're not taking public transportation, and we're always accompanied by an interpreter, and usually the principal comes with us as well. But we're always under close and careful care. The threat level is raised one level, and I was assured by the Santa Clara County Moscow Commission that it's more of a political thing. If you actually read the threat, it says don't go to Chechnya or the Balkan states, which we're not. But the State Department went ahead and raised the level for all of Russia as a way of kind of thumbing their nose at Putin. And I guess there's a thing going on right now where we do something to piss him off, and so then he does something to piss us off, and then we put restrictions on something, and then he puts restrictions on something. So it's kind of more like a war of State Department actions right now, and not necessarily related to any real physical threat. So just wanted to address that.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
Okay, and we're done.
You're done.
Thank you.
Spasibo.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to, for the consent agenda minus 6H and I.
And I would make that motion with the correction of a typo on page 9 of 6B.
Okay.
All right, great. So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? You just got approved. You're welcome. And we see how easy that was? One stipulation that I would like to make is one of the last things I'll do as board president is we need to have a presentation by you at some future board meeting when you come back. So tell us all about it. Okay? And
Great.
Travel safe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
You always do. That's only for roll call. Which we're going to have some. Okay. We have 7A, approval of resolution 1819-18 to apply and receive funds for up to 10 compressed natural gas buses for special needs transportation through the California Energy Commission.
Alvaro, just in case you're wondering, Alvaro has been asked by the Santa Clara County Office of Ed to attend a special meeting of CBOs. And so it's quite an honor, and we said yes, so that's where he is.
Good. Lucky for him. How good for him to attend a meeting. What an honor. Boy, do we know how to honor people.
Yeah, really.
Sorry,
So
tongue in
Trish is
cheek.
here to talk about the bus.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you very much. So, as I had said in previous meetings, we've been ferociously going after grants for new buses. This is the first one that we have applied for that we could actually get our special need buses replaced. So it's any diesel bus. In previous grants, we've had to only go after the big Type 1 buses, the 84 passengers. So this will update all of our special needs fleet, which we use every day. Our mechanics are great by keeping them on the road. As you can see, the ages range from 1993 all the way to 2007. Our average mileage on the odometers is over 200,000 miles.
Mercy.
So by approving this resolution, if we are awarded the grant, we'd be able to get rid of, scrap 10 old buses and receive 10 new CNG buses. We did not meet the criteria for the electric buses, which was the basis of the grant, mainly because our temperatures in Gilroy are too high, and where we travel. We're traveling up to Fremont, San Jose, Santa Cruz, and Freedom with these buses, as well as in Gilroy. So just because we're operating on freeways and the temperatures within Gilroy did not allow us to apply for the electric grant.
Questions? Comments? Trustee Good.
Where and how will these buses be fueled?
It'll include $50,000 for infrastructure, so they'll be fueled on our site.
Right? Yeah. Thank you.
Is there a great likelihood that you'll be approved?
Yeah, it's statewide, so it's in the package. There's a list of lower income families within Gilroy. They compare us to the other agencies and school districts that have applied, and we're based upon that.
You feel hopeful?
I'm very hopeful. We've gotten one grant in the past, so I'm very, very hopeful. Yes.
It's great. I had read about this, and I was wondering whether we were going to apply, and boom, then
Yes.
I got the agenda, and here you are. So
Yeah.
I was excited to see that. Any other questions or comments?
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, this is a roll call vote, and I remember. We took.
Yes.
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 Great. It's
Thank you.
approved. Thank you.
Have a good
Good
evening.
luck.
Yeah.
So Anna or Paul, who's doing it? So you got designated?
Okay, 7B.
So Anna O'Connor is going to give she's our fiscal services controller, and I think this is your first presentation to us, right?
I think it is.
Great. And she's doing a great job. So she's going to talk to you about our annual developer fee report.
Okay, so we'll start doing fix. Alrighty. Which one do I hit, Maribel? Okay. Good evening, Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Flores and members of the board, I'm here on behalf of Alvaro Mesa to present the 2017-2018 developer fee report. And there we go. The first slide shows the developer fees collected going back to 2005, 2006. And the fees that we collected for the 2017-2018 fiscal year are $2,422,000. And we've already collected for the current fiscal year, 2018-2019, approximately about $370,000. I've already collected an additional $17,000 once this presentation was put together.
Anna, what was that through? What date? That 300?
Oh, it was through October, let's see.
The 22nd.
22nd, October 22nd.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. This shows the use of the funds during the 17-18 fiscal year. The developer fees collected, $2,368,000, interest of $54,000, giving you the total of $2,422,000. The certificates of participation were $1,705,000. And then I'm going to I kind of broke this down of where the funds were spent for the developer fees for the classrooms for the Gilroy High School Science Lab, GECA, and Los Animas, and even Rod Kelly was a little bit into that $64,750. Some tech items for Rucker, I believe this was for the Rucker kindergarten. And then for Rod Kelly, we had some, that was PE equipment and storage. And then the CASH conference, which is the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. That's an annual conference that usually the Director of Facilities attends. Our annual bank fees, Bank of New York Mellon for $2,000. And then Vail Consulting took care of the justification study, the developer fee justification study Contract services consists of the enrollment projection contract, and then RJA, which is the civil engineer on the new school property. Small amount into advertising. And then the improvement of buildings, the $969,000 was to Premier Builders for the Gilroy High School math building. And then at the very end, we had some furniture that went to Rucker. That's how it was spent. All right. And this slide shows, on the left, it's a summary of what the previous slide has shown you. And I want to emphasize the first interim, and I apologize because the word interim is misspelled. I noticed that after I had submitted it. We are projecting $1.5 million for the collection of developer fees, and that will be going to our expenses, our object code of $4,000. The majority of the $238,000 is the Gilroy High School math furniture. That came to about $255,000. So the majority of it is in there, and then about $55,000 is in the object code 5,000 of the 82. And what else? The 82 also has the enrollment projection, and then some civil engineering costs, and then the object code 6,000 has, I believe that is Premier Builders, $447,000. And then we have our debt services payments that come in twice a year, shows us a deficit balance of $1,021,000, but then you take the positive balance of $2,906,000 and add it to the current year, and we will have a positive balance of $1,885,269.
The only thing that worries me about that is what we're projecting, 1.5.
1.5, you think it's too high?
No, no, you're right on. I just did the math. But it's lower, and, we have that debt service every year.
Correct.
1.7. So it's just something the district always has to remember, is that we have that COP payment annually. Yep. And we primarily, and it's always paid out of developer fees, but if we don't collect enough in developer fees and that beginning balance isn't there, then it's coming out of the general fund, the difference.
Right. Trustee Rosso?
We collected $2.422 million.
Last
what
year.
was the projection for
The
this year?
projection, we had changed it. We had brought it up a couple of times.
Yeah, but we're always really conservative. And if you take 370,000 times 4, that's where they got the 1.5. That's based on what we've collected through October. But it could go up. We don't know that. We have to predict on what we've collected so far.
But it also could collapse.
It could also go down, and that could. It won't. I can't remember on the chart, but we had some years where we didn't collect that much, as you know.
Right, the very first.
Yeah, if you go back to that chart, that's why we always have to watch this. I mean,
I
a number of those years we wouldn't have been able to make our debt service, which back then was 2.2. Now it's 1.7. So just always have to keep that in mind.
You have to keep that in mind. And are there any other questions?
No. Okay. All righty. Now, this is an action item?
Yeah, you have
So
to
we have to
accept it annually.
Move to accept the 2017-18 annual developer fee report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, great.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank
Well
you very
done.
much.
See? No, you've got your first one out of the way.
Okay.
And Kermit, who has done many of these, now is 7C, Student Achievement Results 2018, California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, affectionately known as CASP.
Affectionately, exactly. Good evening, Dr. Flores, President Paceno, members of the board. Yeah, that is correct. Yes, thank you. Yes, I've done a number of board presentations, but my first this year. A number of these we're going to have this evening because a number of the presentations that I kind of spread out over the course of fall or school year got kind of collapsed this year, and I'm going to be up here for a couple presentations. The CASP in particular, although we have the results, and you've seen preliminary results of the CASP from all of the actual results of the CASP from all of the SIPSA presentations you've been seeing, and we had preliminary results that the board saw and principals saw back in August, but the state delayed their release until just a few weeks ago, and so we kind of like to wait till we give our official presentation to the board, although it kind of feels a little late now, once we have all of the state data in, so we can really take a look at the whole picture here in this presentation. I'm not sure if this slide is necessary to explain the CASP anymore, right? We're now in our 4th year, as Dr. Flores spoke this evening, in recognizing our recipients of the top scores, which was great to see. The one thing I just want to mention is the science was just field tested this past year. So 5th, 8th, and 10th or 11th or 12th graders take the science test. And that's something we're still working on of how we're going to do it in this year. So this is the first year of the real science test, since they field tested the items this past, or piloted the items this past spring. Every high school student, at the high school level, the English and math tests are for the 11th graders, but the science test is to be administered once to every student sometime in high school. And so theoretically, you would administer that science test when they finish their core curriculum of biology, chemistry, and physics. That falls at the 11th grade year. And so our quandary is, do we give the 11th graders one more test in that same year that they're taking other high-stakes tests like AP tests that in the spring of their 11th grade year, or do we just put it off? We can give it during the 12th grade year and just say, okay, 12th graders, you're going to have one test to take, but that becomes a little challenge of motivating 12th graders to take a test seriously the spring of their 12th grade year, right? So we're kind of caught in a little catch-22 situation. I've been talking to colleagues at the county, and a number are doing different things, right? A number are saying, you know what, we're just going to give the 11th graders a test and just get it over with. Others are saying, you know, we're going to try 12th. So, you know, we'll work with principals this spring, and we're going to pick a tactic, right? And we'll kind of see how the results play out based on that. And we may do some shifting over the next couple of years based on how we feel it best works for, you know, for us and for students. I mean, we have to kind of think on both sides. So our overall CASP results, we have the chart of Gilroy Unified's past 4 years here, both with ELA and math. I break it down by grade level and then the overall. And basically what we see is we saw a couple grades make some gains, saw some gains at 3rd and 4th grade in ELA. Actually, I was going to turn on a little pointer here just so we can look here. So 3rd and 4th made some gains at in ELA, and then in math, 3rd, 4th, and 5th all made slight gains at a little more at some grade levels, and then at 6th through 8th and 11th saw some flat scores, some drops. Probably our biggest drop was in 8th grade ELA. We saw a large drop there. You know, I could speculate, for example, in ELA in general, so if we look at the overall ELA in general, a drop of about 1.5 points and just basically flat, right? They're giving us the decimal points now in the state averages so we can see our slight gains or our slight drops, maybe to make us, when we're not making the big gains, give us a chance to see what little gain or drop we're seeing. You know, that ELA is a little bit more than what I would say is flat, to seeing that over a percentage point and a half of drop. In K through 8, we had a new English Language Arts implementation. We had benchmark advance for the first year in elementary last year. We had Study Sync for the first year in middle school, which is a move to a heavily online curriculum, a lot more emphasis on writing and analysis of literature. And so some of those things are the literature and nonfiction text. So those are the directions we want to see. Now, on the one hand, we saw some gains at elementary. We didn't see those gains in middle school. So, new curriculum isn't always going to play out the same way. I think we're going to watch the second year of implementation. We're going to see them filling in some of the gaps and see where our ELA scores play out over the next couple of years. And we saw some mixed results, as you've seen in from the SIPSA presentations, right? We've seen some schools that really have had some strong implementation at certain grade levels, made some solid gains. We saw a couple of our higher performing schools make a little step back a little bit this year, but after several years of gains. So, it's really good for you to see the school by school implementation in addition to this overall. Dr. Flores, were you going to make a comment?
Well, I was just going to say, with like any adoption, it takes 2 or 3 years. And we're seeing it like with benchmark, because last year, remember, we said the SEAL schools didn't have to implement it. A lot of them did. But really, this is the first year of benchmark full implementation for all the elementary schools. Same with Steady Sync. It's the second year. Talking with teachers, they're much more comfortable at all levels this year than they were a year ago, and they've had more training. So we're going to hope that these new adoptions, which are aligned, of course, with the standards and with what they're going to be assessed on, will hopefully lead to better results, over time. And I don't know what other districts did for adoptions, but in our district, this is really our second year of new adoptions.
Right, exactly. And so if we look at our performance then compared, I just did the last 2 years, just to say the last 2 years of Gilroy Unified compared to the state of California. We saw in English language arts, the state of California as a whole made about a percentage point or so gain in English language arts, and when we see some of the breakdown by counties, we did see that. So kind of they had as a whole, there was a percentage point or so gain, and we had a little percentage point loss. So our gap between us and the state and ELA, where we were holding even, we dropped a little below that. In mathematics, the state made a little bit larger gain as a whole. However, we have been outperforming the state in mathematics since the beginning of CASP, and we're still there. They're inching closer, I guess, right? So we want to keep our gains going to maintain that. But I think if we look at some of the grade level comparisons between Gilroy Unified and the state, if you look across all grades, and blue is Gilroy Unified and the orange is California, you can see that at all grades we are a few percentage points below, except 11th grade. Kind of interesting that here we're even. So on the one hand, you'd predict, okay, you're below in all these lower grades, we're going to be low in 11th grade. But then you look at, and then you do the same thing with the next slide, just do the same comparison with math. We see some where we're above or at all grade levels except 6th grade, right? But 7th grade and 8th grade leading into high school were as our strongest grades, outperforming. You can see if you look at 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, right across there, the state's fairly much stays flat, right? 36, 38, 37. And in Gilroy Unified, we've done very well at 7th and 8th grade. We maintained, even I think there was a drop in 8th grade, and we're still, it was fairly flat. It's a drop in 7th grade, 3 percentage point drop in 7th grade, and still well above the state average. But then would we say, okay, we're going to predict a higher level in 11th? We're at the state level, but what we'd like to see is outperforming that at the same rates we are at 7th and 8th grade. And so those will be, then we can't just say it was the kids from the year before, because in high school we got to wait 3 years for the kids to keep moving through. But our scores have been strong in math in 2015, 16, 17, 18, in 7th and 8th grade. So, on the one hand, we've got a big problem here in 8th grade. Are we going to maintain this? You can't say that, and then on the other hand say, our scores are going to be great in 11th grade because it's based on our 8th grade scores, right? It's going to be different tests. It's going to be 3 years later, right? And we'll have to watch those play out and make the gains at each of those grade levels as we continue to move forward. So just a comparison with the neighboring counties. We kind of maintained more or less, we're even with a majority, even or above in majority of the neighboring counties. We're below the Santa Clara County average, but we're going to look at some subgroups in a minute that we've looked at in the past as well. You can see a lot of the counties in ELA did make that little 1% or 2% gains, right? And so that's our task, is to keep that, make up for that drop and keep moving forward for Gilroy Unified as well. Was our comment on that one, or? All right. So if we look at the subgroups, actually the interesting thing was where subgroups were not making much bigger change than we saw overall, and we still have the achievement gap that we've seen in the past, both at the state level and the district level. That has not gone away, right? We're not, it is still something that we need to continue to address. What's interesting is the volatility for us was actually, seems like mostly in the white subgroup. In ELA, there was a several percentage point drop. But then in math, we had a several percentage point gain, so some interesting volatility there, whereas our other subgroups had a gain in socioeconomic disadvantage, which is 60% of our population. So that was a great one to see in terms of trying to make up achievement gap overall. But if the other groups all go up, which is what we want, it's tough to close that achievement gap, right? So I have a couple slides here that I presented last year, and I thought it was worth presenting again, because when we look at those subgroups and we look at our comparison with the county, what we have to remember is who is our population at Gilroy Unified. And when we look at the subgroup of Hispanic in particular, that's 70% of our students. 70% of our students fall in the category Hispanic of any race, right, as an ethnic group. And then those Hispanics, and some of those Hispanics are socioeconomically disadvantaged, and some of those Hispanic students or families are not socioeconomically disadvantaged. And so to remove race or ethnicity from it and look at it as an issue of the disadvantage of the families. And so here, if we look at these subgroups, these are Hispanic or Latino students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. If we compare ourselves to Santa Clara County, if we remember that graph before, where we were way below the performance of Santa Clara County, here we're at actual equal to, or in math, outperforming this same subgroup of students, which makes up a chunk of our population. Then the other portion of those, if we look at the Hispanic students that are not socioeconomically disadvantaged, here we see when we take poverty out of the issue, then we see not only are we outperforming the state and the county in ELA and mathematics, but then we're seeing those students are performing above the averages, right? 57% compared to 49%, right? And 46% compared to, 38% for the state average. So well above the state averages for those subgroups. So I thought just to keep those things in mind as we do comparisons. Sometimes those comparisons can be faulty or misleading, perhaps is a better word. So I'm going to move on to some other things, looking at student reports. So, one of the things is, what can we do? What do we get out of CASP? We saw some nice SIPSA presentations this evening talking about, training our younger students to use the tools in CASP, right? And so that we're getting the most accurate scores possible. On the one hand, it's like, we're just teaching them to take the test better. Well, that's what we do, right? If we're going to be effective test takers, we need to learn how the tests are given and do them more effectively, especially third and fourth graders. We're in their first years of it, correct? But in addition, some of the reports that we worked with principals on this year to work back with their staff there was a report here where they had target areas. I think Ms. Reyes spoke a little bit about how she worked with her staff on this particular report, in which they could see the minuses over on the right. They could see which areas of the test did the students at their grade level were they a little weaker on as compared to the rest of the test. So you'll say, okay, which areas did we not quite prepare our students well enough on, and to think about those things. But we also had some guiding questions for them down at the bottom to say, are these essential standards for the grade level? So you might get carried away and say, language usage, we had a minus on language usage. We need to really focus all of our attention this year on language usage. But that grade level needs to go back and reflect on how essential is that. Maybe we need to do a bit more, but don't revamp your curriculum because of one little area that was weak on the test, right? And so we don't want to get carried away with overemphasizing things. Not that it's not to point out to say, maybe this was do I have a grade level here? I don't think I have the grade level here. Let's say this was a third grade and it was their first time through Benchmark Advance, and they say, you know what, yeah, that's true. In Benchmark Advance, we didn't take advantage of some of the materials this past year at our grade level in language usage. How can we tease that out, right? Not completely redo our pacing, but look at the ways to bring out some of the areas that were weak, and also to say, okay, the area that we were strong in, if they were strong in word meanings, was that something we emphasized? Was that luck of the draw? Or was that something that you did last year as a cohort, right, as teachers that led to that? And so those are the kind of questions that they can reflect on, try to get a little bit more, tease a little bit more meaning out of some of the results, rather than say, we went up 2 points, we went down 2 points, percentage points.
Kermit, does CASP give you the number of items as well? Because, for example, Target 8 may have 8 questions, and target
Correct.
11 may have
Correct.
2.
And they are, and that's what a lot of the grade level teams looked at those to say, which are those essential standards? Say, okay, fractions and decimals are crucial. Yes, we can see that 7 or 8 items on the test are around that. Much of our curriculum is based on that. And we can see that there's just going to be a couple items on language or word meaning, so they can, that's not in this report, that's in a separate document of how they built the test, so that they can kind of reinforce whether or not, and they've already kind of created curricular maps to balance that out.
But so they have that information
Exactly,
about
exactly.
number of items
Correct.
in each
correct.
of the target
It's a range.
items.
It's a range of items because the students all don't get the same amount of items, but it'll say student will get 3 to 4 items or 6 to 8 items, right? So you get a sense of importance of that standard. And
Thank
then as the mapping teams have met over the past years, they've used that to decide, to help determine essential standards for those grade levels. And the curriculums often very much reflect that as well. The next page I just wanted to show, we've seen this before, but it's the interim assessments where you may have here mention of, they're taking interim assessments for CASP. The students are going to practice the CASP tests. So this is an example at grade 6, which interim assessments of about, you can see the number of items, about 15 items, 12 to 15 items, depending on ELA or math, that are short little assessments just kind of focused on a couple of standards or major areas like geometry, expressions and equations, or informational text versus literary text. And so as the students work through, we kind of encourage these to start kind of middle of the year on. A lot of the math interim assessments at the elementary level in particular have them placed in the curricular map to help guide teachers when would be the most appropriate. You just taught the fractions unit, a very appropriate time to try the fractions interim assessment. We don't insist that they give all of these. We support schools to give at least 2 of the English language arts tests and 2 of the math tests, so they've had practice with each, and then they may use additional ones as they want, but we want to make sure every student has some exposure. We encourage teachers to use some of them as a teaching tool. They're allowed to show these on the screen in the class and use as warm-ups. And in fact, we're going to, I'm going to be working with Kanani Pratt for a CASP interim training. The State Department came out with a few more suggestions of ways to use interims effectively. And so we're going to work with sites to ways that they can encourage teachers to use them in an effective manner without over-testing, right? And so, I get some pushback from teachers. We're giving benchmarks and we have to give our unit assessments and then now these CASP, right? So what's the reasonable amount? We have a minimum amount we want to make sure students do, and then work at their site to determine how can they reasonably work those into the curriculum in an appropriate manner.
Kermit, what does IAB stand for? Interim assessment?
Interim assessment block.
Block.
Yeah, interim assessment block. They're calling it a block test because it's a block of questions around one standard.
Okay.
They have another one called the comprehensive assessment, which actually they have a full CASP 43 question assessment that you can assess the students and they will give you a CASP report just like the parents get for that. And I had a couple teachers give it a couple years ago and they said, the amount of time that took and then the scoring of the items required was not worth it, and so we really focus on it. And other people, in addition, have that I've talked to, colleagues in the county, agree that very rarely are people using those interim, those full comprehensive assessments. It just isn't appropriate within the school year. At the point that they're getting close to be able to take that test towards the end of the year, they're getting close to CASP time, and we got to find the balance of preparation versus burning students and losing curricular instruction time. And just a sample of the the parent reports that go home. If they were a 5th grader, then they can see multiple scores, so they can see if they've been growing in their scale score growth. They might see that they've grown in scale score growth, but you can also see the bars raised, so you may go up in scale score growth, but still drop below a MET standard to nearly MET standard, but then that nearly MET standard is in the context of multiple years of tests. 3rd through, or 5th, 6th, and 7th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are the ones that are going to get multiple years. By the time they get to 11th, it's just a single score, and 3rd is just a single score. But those middle grades really can see some progress over time, or how students are performing, as well as some of the subtests. And these last 2 slides are just to remind ourselves that this is one measure within a series of measures we use in our LCAP, right? So these overall scores we put in our LCAP to measure that along with other academic achievement scores and actually other results that we're going to look at tonight. So I'm not going to belabor this point right now since we're going to be going on to another presentation. Any questions about the CAS presentation then?
Trustee McCart.
Thank you, Kermit. Say something about 11th grade. Why that huge drop? They end up at, what, 32%?
Especially in mathematics.
So 32% of the students in 11th grade are proficient.
Right. So
correct?
Correct.
So
So, you know, if you, in the past, just to compare to our previous, the CSTs that we had, we would test the students at the class they were in. So if they were in a geometry class, we'd give them a geometry test. If they were in an Algebra 1 class, we'd give them an Algebra 1 test. And now the expectation is that every student complete Math 3. So it's Math 1 with Algebra and Geometry, Math 2, more Algebra and Geometry, and Math 3 with Algebra 2 and Stats woven in over those 3 years, right? So every student, no matter how they did in math, if they had to repeat and go back and repeat a Math 2 class and not get to Math 3, will take that test. So across the state, we're saying, and then we're saying, are you prepared or nearly prepared for college level math now at the end of your junior year? So on the one hand, those scores are low. On the other hand, it's giving us a real sense of how many of our juniors at the end of the year are really ready for CSU college level work. And so what we're going to see is we're going to see a real correlation between these math scores in a lot of districts and our CSU UC qualification rate, right? Because it's going to be one of the major thresholds is, can students get through those 3 years of math successfully and be able to demonstrate on a test. And so that's why we're seeing at the state level and at the and in our district as well, right? Those kind of lower scores, right? Much interesting contrast to ELA, right? Where it's the highest of the levels. So that one seems a little out of whack to me. It seems like if the test had been scaled appropriately, we would have seen a similar growth or pattern across the levels. But the math, it really is that's fairly clear in terms of as we build students up to really be successful in that Math 1 and Math 2 and Math 3 sequence and come out with those Algebra 2 and pre-trig skills to be able to pass that test effectively.
So,
what's that?
By the end of their 11th.
By the end of their 11th grade year, exactly. Yeah.
But is this actually saying that only 32% of the kids are proficient?
Well, in terms of saying right now,
Proficient up through trig. That's a pretty high.
Yeah, that's a high bar.
Pretty high bar for all kids in the state.
Okay.
Pass that high level of math, you're ready for college if you've done that.
Right.
Correct. And keep in mind that our graduation requirements have just recently changed, where we do require our students to complete through Algebra 2. This is, in fact, this group was the first group that went through those new graduation requirements. So those graduation requirements say that they must do that by the end of their senior year, not the end of their junior year. So we do have, yes, 32% of our juniors who are proficient through basically beginning trigonometry, because that's what the test is scaled up to. So that doesn't mean that by the time they graduate that there's only 32% proficient in those areas, because many of those students are taking that Math 3, which is your Algebra 2 level, or they're taking the trigonometry their senior year. So by the end of their senior year, they are reaching that proficiency. Now, obviously, our goal is that we want every student proficient through Math 3 by the end of their junior year, right? That's ideal. So we will always continue to work to that, and that was part of that change of the graduation requirement. So we're also looking at the curriculum and working with our math teachers to blend all of this information and make sure, like with the interims, that we are focusing on those key standards throughout and getting our kids to be masters of this content by the end of their junior year. It's going to take a little while, and it will be good for us to see more than just 1 or 2 years of CASP to see how we're doing with that, with all of the changes we've made, not just at the site level, but at the district level with these requirements.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Trustee Bass? No? Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. And now we go on to LPAC. Thanks,
Oh,
Kermit.
all right, me again. You gonna set me up there, Maribel? All right. So on the desktop there, I think it's open. Right over here. The first one. All right. Okay, right now I'm going to present to you on the LPAC results, the English Language Proficiency Assessment of California, because those also just got released a few weeks ago, so it just kind of all coalesced into this to this board meeting tonight. This is the assessment test that replaces the CELT. So the CELT was the test that measured English language learners across California. That test ended 2 years ago. Last year was a year without any assessment all fall, and then we gave this assessment last spring. So the window for the English Language Proficiency Exam, or the LPAC, starts in February. So from February 1st to the end of the year is the window in which we would assess all English language learners.
Big window.
So the question is, where do you do that in that window? Well, we've got CASP locked in at the end of the year, kind of April, May for the most part. So we've chosen, and most districts that I spoke with have chosen to use the beginning of the window. So February 1st, we deployed our teams to go from school to school to administer the LPAC, starting February 1st, working through we actually started with the high schools first, because the high schools tend to give their CASP a little earlier. The high schools give their CASP early April or late March to kind of separate it from AP testing, to give kind of some separation there. So we started with them, and then we worked through the middle and elementary schools. And the LPAC test, like the CELT, is paper pencil at this time. They've told us a couple years out they're going to be moving it to computer-based, but not for a few years. They're in the process now of negotiating that and determining how that's going to look. But there is a reading-writing component. There is a listening component, and then there's a speaking component, and that speaking component must be done one-on-one for every student, just like it was on the CELT before. So a very similar type of administration, where we'll have teams of retired teachers going and administering the one-on-one for all those students, and then site personnel, classroom teachers administering the larger class whole group testing for the upper grades. The kinder first and second is actually one-on-one for the entire test. So some different, or just kinder and first, I'm sorry, second grade does have the whole class element. The other part of that, and I think a few board members might have, if I remember correctly, might have received some feedback last spring, the listening portion of the LPAC, it used to be that the whole listening portion of the test was administered by a proctor reading the instructions of the test to the students. The students would then answer, and we'd have multiple proctors in a room, and sometimes they'd have to kind of speak softly, and then were they hearing the test correctly so they could respond to those listening and speaking questions. And so LPAC moved to a computer based file that they play, so that every student in the state of California will hear the same wording for the most portions of that listening and speaking part of the test, which makes a lot of sense, but had some implementation issues with Chromebooks and the website logging them off while they were waiting for the next student to come into the room. And now the state has a little interesting implementation for security purposes, which Maribel and I have some discussions about, that they're going to require a two-stage sign-up. So when they log in, then it sends them an email, and they have to get the email. So supporting our retired teachers to go through this process is a little bit of training, a little bit of support, but it's what we have to do to implement this test. But just some extra little logistics that we worked with the first time last spring with the annual LPAC, and we'll be continuing with this spring with our second year of implementation. So that is the kind of an overview. I probably already spoke about half my slides here already, but the other part I want to talk about is that they actually have developed two tests. The old CELT assessment was one CELT that you gave if a student came new to the state or new to the country. We'd give them the CELT whenever they arrived during the school year. What they've done with the LPAC is that they've created an initial assessment, which is shorter, and the annual summative assessment, which is the data we're looking at tonight. And so every student in California that's an English learner must take the summative assessment sometime in that February to end of school year window. And when they first arrive, they must take the initial assessment to determine, are they an English learner or are they a initially fluent speaker of English? And so that one, the initial assessment determines that, and then later in that year, then they take the summative to get their actual detailed score report of where are their levels.
Kermit, kids that were already assessed and determined to be ELs, did they have to take the IA?
They did not. They did not. So those students, it's only the new students arriving, right, exactly. So once then it's determined to be an English learner, then you just take the annual summative every year until you're reclassified, exactly. It is a little awkward because if you have a student arrive in May, in which sometimes we do have students arrive in May, we have to administer the initial, determine they're an English learner, and then sometime soon after that administer the summative before the last day of school. So, and then they got the CASP right there in May too. So we had some unfortunate situations there with students arriving late in the school year, but, following the requirements, we just work with the staff to say, you know what, give them one test 1 week, give them a few days to be in instruction for a while, and try to, then maybe in a couple of weeks do the other one. Do something reasonable, right? Especially if the student's only going to be with us for a short month at the end of the school year. As we have migrant students come back from our Ochoa camp, right, we want to be able to work with that as appropriately as we can within the constraints we have. So this chart shows the LPAC levels. The LPAC has 4 levels on it. The CELT, if you remember, had 5 levels. I have a CELT chart in here you might have seen just to kind of remind us the comparison of to look at the data between the 2 tests. And the 4 levels are kind of abbreviated. On the reports, they just say level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, but there are descriptors that kind of say level 1 is beginning stage of English language development. Level 2, the descriptors are it's a somewhat developed level of English. Level 3, moderately developed level of English, and level 4, well-developed level of English. So those 4 levels then, they have a chart here, and this actually chart the picture I have here is actually on the score report that the parents receive because it correlates the 4 LPAC levels to the ELD standard proficiency levels, of which there are 3. So you might be asking yourself, why are there 3 English language development standards, and why did the LPAC not follow that lead? And I don't know if I have a great answer for that or not. It's nice that they have a correlation chart. Perhaps the idea that your test score that you receive on an annual test is not where you are in terms of English language development, to kind of keep us away from saying, oh, they're an intermediate, oh, they're an early advanced, if they'll sell, oh, they're a 3, they're a 4. That's just a test score where you take one time, as opposed to where are you on a fluid scale of emerging, expanding, or bridging ELD standards. That's one of my suppositions. I can see James is nodding in agreement that he thinks that's a logical way to go with
one dimension of the pool is in meters, and the other.
So I agree. It has some level of difficulty, perhaps, and because now, as we report LPAC levels of teachers are much more likely to think about, oh, what was the LPAC level of that student, right? Rather than make the jump to say, okay, now where do I look in this ELD standards? And that's why, getting used to, okay, a level 3 student, a low level 3 student is, if they're looking through the ELD standards, they're in that expanding. And to remember that it's 4 subtests, right? Where are they in listening? Where are they in speaking? And they can be very different on those, as we see on our data on the next couple of slides. Since we're looking at this, the question of reclassification comes up, right? What are we going to use for our reclassification criteria? So we were waiting from the state to see what guidance they gave us, and they said, districts, you can develop your own criteria. We said, all right, there we go. Thank you very much. We'll take a look at that. So the level 4, the well-developed was, an obvious point for us. And what we're doing is right now, we're working with sites right now to say, go ahead and go as low and look at students down to the mid-level 3, right? Anybody in this bridging range. And so anybody that's in the mid-level 3 or above, if they're level 4, as long as that other criteria is in place, right? So it's not just the LPAC by itself. So our other criteria is either a CASP score that is a Met standard or our STAR reading scores that are at or near grade level, or for the 9th and 10th graders, the MAP reading scores that the high schools are administering right now. So we don't want to have this LPAC out of any kind of context, especially since it's our first year. And actually, I was just speaking to one of the facilitators tonight before the system presentations and said, for the first time, he has some 5th graders at level 4 that are not meeting the STAR criteria. So thinking, okay, is the LPAC for fifth grader, was it come out a little bit easier than the CELT in the past? We, looking at a lot of the practice questions, kind of felt like there was a little bit higher academic rigor involved, but it could also be how they scaled out the items too. So if we, oftentimes after a couple of years of implementation, we see a rescaling of items, right, in terms of how tests are going to be, what the levels are going to fall in. So that wouldn't surprise me if our scores all dipped in a couple of years because of a rescaling of where those levels are. We'll see as the test plays out over the next couple of years. But that's what we're looking at, a reclassification is somewhere in this range. And if we look at the next chart then, looking at our kind of our overall performance, we can see that kind of holds with what we've looked at in the past. So in this chart, just so you can see by grade level, how did it all play out, you can see GUSD, who scored at those level 3 and 4, right, at that moderately or well-developed versus California. And actually you can see kind of down across the board all the way to the overall at 66% of students versus 65%, right? We're right in line with where English learners are across the state of California. So kind of good to see that there's a level of consistency there. So the question is, okay, who's up for reclassification then, right? Well, we 30% of the students in this level 4, 30% of 2,200 would be maybe 300 students. However, we do set our criteria much more strict for the kinder first and second graders. So although we have large numbers of kinder first and second graders, we really have higher criteria for reclassification in their reading scores to make sure we don't have a borderline first grader being reclassified when we could easily provide some additional English support over the next couple of years. So anyway, it's just a kind of a glance there. I think the other interesting thing on this chart, a couple of things you can see. You can see a couple of grade levels that take some huge dips, right? So third grade took a big dip, California and Gilroy Unified and from second to third in both Gilroy Unified and the state of California. That's the change from that second grade test to the third through fifth test. So we can see when they jump up to another level of difficulty of test, there was quite a drop there, and then we saw a similar from, I think it was from fifth to sixth, right? When they leave the fifth grade test and hit the middle school test, saw some similar dips. I think the other interesting thing on this chart is, as we talk about how are we doing with long-term English learners, is this first column that I think is very, very telling, right? That as we watch over time, as we reclassify students over time, we see those numbers drop as we move up the grade levels, right? We start out with about 300 or so English learners in kindergarten, dropping down in the 200s. Then we reclassify more in middle school, right? And so some of those students needed 5 or 6 years to get to reach a near proficiency in reclassification. So that by the time you're in 12th grade, right, 40 English learners, okay, who are those students? Are some of them special ed? Do they have some other disabilities that we are working with support? Are there some struggling students as well as newcomers that might have arrived in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, right? So you have this combination there. So I think that sometimes we need to make sure we recognize the progress we're making, right? Yes, our English learners don't score as well on standardized tests. Yes, we have many that are not proficient yet, but many of them have not been here enough years to be proficient yet or to be at the well-developed level, right? So I think that's a very positive picture of the progress we make. And now, would we like that to happen sooner, right? Would we like that in 8th grade we didn't still have 100 students that were learners, or that in 7th or 6th grade we still had 161, right? That's our goal, right? To have that happen as early as appropriately possible as we move those students from that English learner category to show that they're demonstrating proficiency or near proficiency on their exams.
And Kermit, we can't assume that those 161 sixth graders all came in kindergarten.
Right. Correct, exactly.
Unfortunately, they don't come in those nice little packages.
That is true.
For us.
However, I agree with that. I would say right now at the middle school level, we have about 25 ELD. So when those students who have been here less than 2 or 3 years, and those classes opposed to a grade level or near grade level class. So 20. How many is that? Is that maybe 8 sixth graders at each school times 3 schools? That's 25 of those kids, been here far less than the 6 years exactly. But for the most part at our upper grades, 70 to 80% of our students are the long-term ELs. They have been in public education in the United States for much of that time. But you're right, it's not all of them. You're correct. Pat.
I have 2 questions, and they both have to do with communicating this information back to the teachers and the parents. So how does that happen?
So, for the teachers, we load this data into our EDIMS data system. So at the beginning of the year, they can get a look at the CASP scores, the STAR reading scores, and the LPAC score for the first time of those students, so that when they find out the students in their class, they can see a couple of different assessments, and not just have one thing as LPAC level 3 that means what. This first time the test has been given, we don't have a little history. We have some CELT from a couple of years ago. So that LPAC score right now it's kind of standing by itself, but we want to make sure it's in conjunction with the other assessment data they have to say, use this as one piece of the picture.
But they get it early on.
This one's not quite as early. The file, as the tests were being scored, the file I got from the state in August only had about 60% of the scores. So some of the kids had their scores, and the rest of them didn't come through till about a month ago. So hopefully the state can do a little better on that, on getting us all the scores right up front.
Sure, that would be very helpful.
Exactly. So, and the nice thing is, coming right at the beginning of the year, having the recent CASP and recent LPAC then for teachers, that's our goal, to have all of that ready for them for the first day of school.
Okay, so then who passes on this information to parents?
So, did I have a score report here? We'll skip ahead.
You do.
Yeah, the very last, I think, one of the last slides. So then the parent score report, then we mail home. But then in addition, we let them know that there will be an ELAC meeting at their school that will go over this, so that let them know that in an upcoming ELAC meeting, and we tell facilitators, we mailed them home week. Now at your next ELAC meeting, be sure to let parents know that if they have questions or want more information, that they can attend those ELAC meetings for explanation on that. Okay. And you can see how the score report here, since we're on this slide, how this looks with little speedometers to show where in the levels they are. Now that we have some criteria of work reclassification, because the parents are more savvy now about reclassification as we've done training over the years, and what does it take for my son or daughter to be reclassified? They can kind of see, are they at that mid-level 3 or higher in each of the areas, in the oral, the written, and the overall score.
Tell me this comes from the state in Spanish.
This one doesn't, but we included a translation of the report, so it explains each of the boxes in Spanish. What we're looking at doing is whether the state would produce for us based on the language of the home, but oftentimes it's a tough one to say, would they prefer it in Spanish or prefer it in English? They'll send us one report, and so the question is, if we request it in Spanish and then they say, well, I would have liked that in English too, kind of stuck there as well. So we'll see what our options are when they send the reports next year, in terms of having the most appropriate.
I just think it's pretty ironic these are ELs, and the state is sending us these reports in English.
Right. The descriptors are, we have the explanation of these words, we have a separate Spanish picture, but the report itself.
Are in Spanish, but the report itself is in English. I'm sorry. That seems ludicrous to me. And I know not everybody in the state is a Spanish speaker, and that's predominantly what Gilroy Unified is.
Correct, predominantly, you're correct.
It just seems ludicrous.
And in addition, I think it's more incumbent upon us also to explain the report, whether it's in Spanish or English, to explain the report to parents and talk through with them.
Sure.
Although a lot of the levels are very similar to the CELT wording, oral, written, listening, speaking, reading, writing. So we also work with parents on that as well. But that's a good point.
I have a question so I'm a parent of an English-speaking student. So I get this report in the mail, right?
It's only given to English language learners.
Oh, because it says sample student report 5th grade. Then who gets this?
So the
I'm
parent
back on
gets.
Page 9.
So the parent gets this report for their student, no matter what primary language that student had. So whether they're a Spanish-speaking student or Vietnamese or other language, then they'll get this report for how is their English progress.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question?
EL students, EL parents.
All English learners. So you can see we had about 2,200, a little over 2,200 students who were assessed.
Right. I was just curious about the English portion. Did parents do get this in the mail?
So all of them received that report in English, and and then we include a Spanish translation of that report for every parent.
Okay.
Translation, not of the report, but of the indicators.
And what it does little pictures of this box is, and has little arrows and kind of says this box
But not
is
specific to
but for
their
their student. And they would have to
child's-
look at the other report to translate that,
So
correct?
so then they have to interpret that.
Right.
I mean, if you gave me a report in Greek and you gave me the indicators in English,
Right.
I'm not sure I'd figure
Not the
out
idea.
how my sons were doing.
Right.
Sorry.
Yep. So I just wanted to put up a slide after we just looked at that data, kind of skipping around now. We went back to our overall data. And then the next slide is the CELT data from our past 4 years, just kind of see what does this compare to that CELT data that we had before, right? So if we, moving from a 5-point scale to a 4-point scale, if you remember, we had about 30% in the level 4, so if we look at this, if we divide this into 4 quadrants, right, probably puts about 30% there in the level 4, and then we had another 30%, I think, in the level 3, which kind of justifies for us that the level 3, the top level 3 probably is in that nearing proficiency, and the bottom level 3 would not be appropriate for reclassification, right, as we're trying to make something that use this chart to help us see kind of how did that play out as we move from a 4-point system from a 5-point system to a 4-point system. And then the domains and subtests, just to kind of look overall, we see very similar trends. It's very logical that we're going to see that the oral language, here we can see up here for the oral language, right, 80% of students were at the level 3 or 4 in oral, but very few were at that point in reading and writing, right? So the oral is going to come first. They're going to, just like we saw in the CELT, we looked at the subtests for many years, oral is going to come first. When the reading and writing follows, then when they hit that level in both tests, then we'll be able to look at them for reclassification. So it's a very logical trend for language learners. Mm-hmm. All right, I think we've hit them all, not all in order, but we got all the slides.
Okay. Any other questions, board members?
Well, I was really interested in the communication aspect, Debbie, because we put so much time, energy, money, people into this process. And then, so what? So you take the test, and then if it doesn't go anywhere, if the teachers don't understand it, I mean, I assume the teachers were given in-service on, okay, we used to do CELT, but now we're doing this, and here's the differences, and right?
We train our leaders facilitators so they can go back to the sites then and work with those. So then we train our group both to give the test, but also to understand the score report so that those people then, as they support the teachers at their sites, they're able to do that, whether it's through staff meetings or whether it's cohort meetings, to look at those results. Exactly. And I think as we get multiple years of data, it'll give us a little bit firmer grasp of what growth the students are making, right? Are these 6th grade students making growth in the areas we want to see on the test, like we were able to do in CELT? So, yeah.
I think our principals also, they take this very seriously. They dive right into this data.
Right, exactly. So
They've become very knowledgeable about it.
the principals as well, exactly.
Okay. Any other questions? Now we go on to 7E, California Dashboard Local Indicators.
All right, you want to pull that one up for me? All right, I'm going to present the presentation on the local indicators of the California Dashboard, but I may be calling on a number of members down the row here that it was more of a team effort on this one.
Is that the right one?
Yeah, thank you. All right, so this presentation is now a required annual presentation to the board by the accountability structure of California to present a series of local indicators for the California Dashboard. So the next screen here, I just wanted to pull up remind us what the California Dashboard is, right? And so it's the colored pies that indicate our progress in each of the major areas, the state priorities of the state of California. And so this is the release this is the last fall's release, fall 2017, last December was the second release of the dashboard, and this December will be the third release for 2018, and they're continually adding elements to this dashboard. We can see, for example, if we look at our fall data, chronic absenteeism, there wasn't an indicator there. We reported the data last year, If you click on that, it actually takes you to a DataQuest page of the chronic absenteeism rate for your district and schools. We're around, I was at 13%. I don't have it off the top of my head. Very similar to many schools in the state of California. And then this year will be our second official reporting of chronic absenteeism, and then we'll have a color this year then when that comes out, because we've reported it from these past 2 years now through the CalPADS data system. We can see our suspension rate, English learners, graduation rate. One that's interesting, when we have graduation rate, we often talk about our dropout rate. Our dropout rate is no longer an official reported factor anymore. They give us the data. We can calculate our graduation rate. We're still right around, or we've dropped significantly right over the years from 10%, 7% down to in the mid 4%, 4.7, 4.5% dropout rate, but they're really just measuring the...
You said graduation.
Sorry about that.
You're talking about the dropout rate.
Dropout rate, right, exactly. Dropout rate is not reported here. I'm sorry where I misspoke, but the dropout rate has gone down, but they're no longer, well, we won't see that on the dashboard. We'll just see the measure of the graduation rate.
Just for the public, our dropout rate is below 5% now.
Right, exactly. Below the state and county averages, actually, right. So, we can still produce some of those reports, but it won't be officially part of any accountability system. So as we look at these, we walk through some of these. Like if we look at, it's interesting to look at the English language arts and mathematics at the bottom. We're in the orange in English language arts, and we're in math in yellow in math. So we're actually, if you think of our scores, our math scores are actually lower than our English language arts scores. But because we're, I'm guessing when they made the initial cut points several years ago, they probably kind of looked at where the state performance was and said, okay, this is what you should be reaching for. Somewhere they set a target there at looking at all the state performance. And since we're above the state average in math, that puts us in that yellow category. As soon as we make a little bit more, we made a slight gain this year in math. I'm curious to see if that's going to put us in the green. It might have been enough. I don't know if we quite made enough gain to put us in the green this year. We'll see next month when that comes out with since it was just a less than half a percentage point gain. I think you need to make more gain in the category we're in. But in English language arts, we're actually performing higher. But because we dropped slightly, it puts us in the orange category because they've set a higher cut point for English language arts. These are useful to some extent, but we have to remember it's just 1 year to the next. So let's say we grow in ELA 3 years in a row, we're in the green, and 1 year we take a little dip, we would drop into the orange or yellow again. And so they're not looking at kind of multi-year gains. We have to remember it's just 1 year to the next. And so it's important for us to look back and to make sure that we're talking about what are our trend data and not just a 1 year to the next. If 1 year we had a little, last year we had a little higher level of expulsions in the district than we had before, right? Is that going to put us down in the red? Our suspension rate, did that play out there as well? And we'll see where that's going to put us, just a little uptick. Suspension rate's one that we've gone down for multiple years, but because we had a little uptick last year, it put us in the orange. Or if you remember the year before, we were in the green in suspension rate. It's like, okay, from 1 year to the next, we're an orange to a green. So, I have trouble sometimes, justifying that, but it's the accountability system we have. And so I think it's important to understand it then, right? What is it saying? It doesn't look at over time how much have we made a dip in our suspension rate, for example. I think that's a good example there of the limitations of this dashboard. But coming back to our presentation tonight, the bottom section of the dashboard then are the local indicators. So the state has said, there are a number of their state priorities which they are going to measure by data we submit, tests we take. LPAC will be the English learner. What's it say? English learner program, right? Measure will be the LPAC assessment. The CASP makes up the English language arts and the math part. The college career indicator is a complex formula, multiple pages long of did they get a 3 or a 4 on CASP or get a 2 on a CASP but had a CTE pathway or pass an AP test, and they stir it up. No, there is actually a formula there, but they give us kind of a sense of what percentage of our students are college and career ready. And they're developing that. They'll be the second year of that, so I think this year they'll have a color for us for that college career readiness. And actually, I'm expecting us to be in a pretty good spot because with our first year of A through G graduates this last spring, we really took an increase on the number of students that were UC or CSU eligible based on their completing the courses with a C or better. I think you saw that when the high schools presented. We saw a big up in the high 40s or 50s at both of the comprehensive high schools. So I'm guessing we're going to start out with a nice color in that first year of College Career Indicator. Now to keep maintaining that and moving forward, right, will be the challenge. So the indicators down below, the local indicators we're going to look at tonight, then the state has said use a process to just evaluate yourself, and the MET doesn't mean that we increased in something. It's saying we've met the requirement of doing some self-evaluation and submitting it to the state and presenting to the board. And so tonight, actually, some of the things we're looking at are some different pieces of data that have been looked at over the last year. I'm just putting it together in one presentation. So I'm going to skip to this one. So here are the 8 state priorities, right? And of the 8 state priorities, priorities 1, 2, 3, and 6 are the ones that we're looking at tonight. These are the ones that they said, we'd like you to do a little self-reflection, right, over the course of each year, and look at those. Because the ones that aren't highlighted, right, priority 4, student achievement, they'll use that by the assessments that they're measuring, right, LPAC and CASP. Student engagement or attendance, they'll use that. That will be the chronic absenteeism. We'll measure that one, kind of how the state will choose that. And they're looking at this broad course of study. They kind of are looking at what are they going to do to measure broad course of study and develop an indicator on that one. So that one will be coming. So tonight we'll look at basic services, state standards, parent engagement, and school climate. So the first one, basic services, they've kind of said, here are 3 areas we want you to report on. Number of misassignments and percentage. So in HR department, we had a report that we have 3 teachers, or less than 1%, misassigned at this time. Number 2 is a standard aligned instructional materials. So that would be our Williams report, which was presented to the board, that we have our standards aligned materials. So this is kind of a summary of a number of different things that you may have heard or had reported over the past year, right? And then number 3 is the recent FIT report, the facilities report that was just finished. I don't know if Dan was going to be here or not, but actually that's below last year. I think last year was at 5-point-something%, and that was a decrease of facilities out of repair. I remember in the past it was a lot of Browndale and South Valley issues, but I can't speak to that myself on that one. Then priority 2, they want to have you reflect on your implementation of your state standards, the instructional materials that you have, the professional development that you're giving. And so we in Ed Services, in conjunction with principals, reflected back on this past year and this fall to say, where are we in terms of providing professional learning or professional development. This chart would be professional development by each of the areas. And so we've kind of put some bullet points there to kind of highlight what are some of the features that we use, which are some of the areas that we know we need to make improvement on. History, social science, still wait as they implement the new standards, but we have old textbooks. We know that we're not where we need to be. So, just doing some self-evaluation. And so this kind of a summary of a lot of the PD that's already happening reflects this, right? But this kind of summarizes and just gives a little rating system to it. And then the next one, there's the full document. I picked a couple of the charts out of the full document, which was also provided. I think there were 4 or 5 of these charts that were in the full local indicators document that we reviewed. One was on instructional materials, one was on other subject areas, and this one is on supporting staff. This one is focused on how are you supporting staff to reflect on their needs, their own needs. So thinking about activities that are done by the academic coaches to do a little self-reflection with teams as they meet with them. The observation tools where principals are able to go back and have sites or departments think about where are the weaknesses that they need to address. The PLC process, right, implemented across all levels to help teachers reflect on what do they need to help move themselves forward. Then the third one, third priority, parent engagement. So this is actually the survey that we administered last year, so we've actually presented on this. I'm just summarizing it here, some of the results of who took our LCAP survey last year, what were a few of the key bullet points from that? We're actually right in the process of administering a new LCAP survey in this next month. So we will have new data to present to the board. So this is just the most recent data, but I have to present it to you before December 1st. So I can't wait for that one because I have to have this presentation to you by December 1st so that I can submit those MET criteria. So it's kind of each fall we have to submit it, whatever data we have at that point in the year, give you an update. And so that's why right now we're looking at old data. Next year I'll include this recent survey data. It will be data you already looked at. It'll just be summarized in this one location then. And then finally, the school climate data. One of the options the state suggests is to use the California Healthy Kids Survey, which is the survey data that we use. We just administered the Healthy Kids Survey this past spring, and it's administered to 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th graders. So mostly secondary with one elementary grade represented. And we can see some of the percentages there. This survey did show a drop from 2015-16 from the 2 years previously. We saw some drops at each of those levels across the grade level. So certainly we've seen other presentations from our staff from the SIPSA presentations about the PBIS, the support they're giving to schools, which is the other data that's there. But this is the one that we're kind of looking at right now. One of the reasons for the drop, I feel, might have contributed to it from this past year is that we squeezed this survey into the spring at the same time as CASP testing, and just wondering at the end of the school year whether we might have hit students at a time where they were kind of more drained rather than fresh to reflect on their experiences. And so as I think it's important that the schools, as they move forward over the next year and use their PBIS, use some of their other ways to gather data, what is this reflect of them? Which are the parts that they need to gather some other data on for themselves? And do we want to, one of the concerns about using the Healthy Kids Survey for us is that it's only every 2 years. So now we're sitting with this data out here for 2 years to kind of wait and see, okay, 2 years from now, how does that play out? And so have to think about that as we move forward in terms of a data collection piece. Not that I'm saying we should administer a full survey to the students every year, but we need to find a way to continually monitor. And that wraps up that one.
Trustee Rosser.
When they report 30% of students report high level of caring adult relationships, how does that compare to other districts?
They have not produced for us at this point a state comparison yet. So when that comes out, maybe I can watch for that and see.
Have we had? What is the highest that we've had reported?
This does show about a 10% drop from 2 years ago, but I could go back and pull out the reports from like the last 3 or 4 years and see, where we were seeing, all I can say is the previous, the 15-16 and the 13-14 showed fairly flat. And so this really kind of does seem like an anomaly, was at the end of the year. We did have some high representation from some schools more than others. Did that throw it off a little bit in terms of getting the surveys administered at the end of the school year? So I have some other outlying factors there, but I could look for some state data comparison for you.
I guess I know we've done a lot of work on school climate.
Right, exactly.
So that's why it seems an anomaly that it would be so low.
Right.
It has to be, because we're doing PBIS everywhere, and as you've heard from the principals' presentations, their indicators say that.
Right, and so that
it seems like we would have some revisit, in other words, to try to determine what are our real numbers in terms of that, because it just seems it doesn't make any sense, and we put a lot of effort in that area. So
just these four items are that 30% stands out. You've got 60% of kids feeling safe, but only 30% of them feel that there's a high level of a caring adult, which is like mutually exclusive.
Well, one
And
is what is
you've
what is
got
at school.
40% of students reporting a high level of expectations, 44% high level of school connectedness, and yet 30% high level of caring adults. So
Right, so they're
that
connected to
doesn't-
school, but not feeling like one adult in particular, they have or that there are multiple adults, right? So, might have, what are the ways what series of questions are they asking to draw that out?
Right.
So they're feeling safe at school, but maybe not as connected or as having that one individual they feel is caring. And so these are, very biased towards the high school level, right? And so we see.
Exactly.
And so we have to keep that in mind too.
Well, except you've got 5, 7, and 9.
Correct.
Which I would expect would carry it. So when I see 5, 7, and 9 and 30%, that is just red flags.
Right.
to
The
me.
fifth was higher. If I could provide for you some breakdown, I could send that up and a follow up. That the fifth was always highest, and we saw kind of a drop across the floor, like we might expect, right? In some of these questions.
Right. Historically, remember, this is the overall. So we do get the individual school reports as well, which you'll see in many of their SIPSA reports because they do refer back to this. Actually, historically, not just in Gilroy, but across the state, it's high in 5th. It drops in 7th.
Sure.
It stays low in 9th, and then it improves in 11th. So that has been the trend. So our 7th and our 9th does tend to pull the overall numbers down. Part of it is going into 7th and 9th, you're changing schools. So when you're taking this survey, you're still fairly brand new to the school. You haven't really fit in, and you haven't had those years of meeting teachers and other staff members to make those connections. So that is part of the issue. Seventh is overall is what happens in 7th grade in middle school in general. Those of you that have worked in middle school, there's a lot of angst, and no one likes me. Attitude. And you see that across the board in 7th grade throughout the Healthy Kids survey in the state, where the numbers drastically drop there in terms of caring adults and relationships as well as school connectedness. So there is a middle school phenomena that, yes, doing Olveus and doing PBIS and working on bullying prevention has helped, but it has yet to change those numbers. The other thing to keep in mind for 7th and 9th in particular is if there is any event that has occurred in society around the time that they are taking the survey, it has a direct impact on how they answer the questions, especially in the safe area. Do students feel safe? So they may say, they'll ask you, my school is completely safe. But for example, if a 5th grader or a 7th grader happened to see a fight, whether it was at school, in the park, on the news, someplace else, they may not feel safe. Doesn't have to do with school or them personally, but it impacts the way they're answering the questions. So we've done a lot of things to try to help with those, to change the impact of outside events and administer it at times where we know there aren't some of those trends happening just in society. But it's hard. And unfortunately, with the safety area, it's getting harder in our society because unfortunately it's hard to not turn on the news and see something that makes people feel unsafe.
Well, and frankly, 60% to me would be high.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got more than half of the kids saying they feel safe at school. I don't have an issue with the safe at school.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 and 2, I don't have an issue with particularly.
Right.
What I have a concern, not even an issue, a concern about is the 30% seems very incongruous compared to 1, 2, and 4.
And
that
that's-
just seems
right.
like, which of these don't belong?
Right.
Right.
Number 3.
And that's where our 7th
You
and
know.
9th really impact those scores overall. So we can bring you the numbers for the different levels, but it is our 7th and 9th that do bring those down. Like I said, 9th grade, a lot of it is that transition from one school to another. 7th across the board is a middle school issue, and you will see in the SIPSAs, especially in their goal 3, how they are addressing some of those issues.
Okay.
how many years have we been doing this assessment?
Long time.
Long time.
Every 2 years.
It was a required, I think at this point now it's an optional state survey that has kind of moved away from required. But there is data going back, exactly.
We don't have that.
Oh, yeah, we have.
To see it, have we moved off? Has this been pretty much where we've been, or?
Can we look at that? I don't think we can talk about that without the results. Can we give you a report on how this compares to 2 years ago to 2 years ago?
Each of them
are we trending?
Because 10 years would give us 5 reports.
5 reports, exactly. And I can speak to I looked back to the last 2. So I looked at the 14-15, or the 13-14 and the 15-16, and those were flat, and we just took this drop this year. But I can go back another one and then put a little chart together just so we can have a few of these data points together. Yeah.
And if we go back the 10 years, you are going to see that cohort. We do have changes, of course, in students, but you'll see how the 5th graders answered well in 5th grade, and then how they answered both in 7th, 9th, and as the 11th graders.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, just one more comment. Again, being that we invest so much effort in this area, it seems to me that we would want to know that there is, that we're getting some results.
Yeah, I get a little worried about basing it on self-report.
Well,
it's students self-reporting, and that's probably never going to correlate with what we're doing as adults about like PBIS.
Right, and I'm not sure what those questions look like. Are they in other words, valid ways of assessing? No, but I'm not an expert about that area. I don't claim to have any sense of that, but is that the best tool we have to assess?
I guess. Statewide tool.
It's a statewide tool.
Okay, well,
we did do for a few years the Project Cornerstone survey. We couldn't afford to keep doing it because it was pretty high cost.
Is this one free, I assume?
It is, right?
There was a fee for the school reports, so we paid the fee so schools could have their school reports.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I just want because again, we value this. This is a very important area. We spend a lot of resources about it, and I think we're doing a pretty good job, but it sure isn't showing in that number.
Right.
And so this is one of those areas, especially in the Goal 3 on school culture, where we do use multiple measures. So we use Healthy Kids Survey as that self-reporting, but obviously we're looking at our suspension data, our expulsion data, as well as our PBIS schools also do a full self-report, which includes how students are reacting. So they do an internal survey of how things are going within the PBIS schools. That's a requirement of being part of PBIS. So we use those reports too. Not 100% of our schools are PBIS schools, so we don't have that for every school at this point. But we do have it for our PBIS schools that are at least in year 2 or year 3. So we use those reports as well to look at a variety of data points to see how we're doing in this area.
Thank you, Deb, for reminding us that it's never just one data point that we need to be looking at, or even 1 year. So, thank you.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions of Kermit? All right. Thank you.
That's all I have for this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we have, that's all, folks. 7F, Board Policies Revisions, first reading. Any questions or comments on the board policies, trustees?
And if you think of something later, just send it to me, because we'll bring this back for the second reading.
Yeah, in 2 weeks we'll have, or do you want to waive this and is it listed?
If you don't have any questions or concerns.
Well, it's listed as a discussion item.
Yeah.
Not an action item.
Well, we can put it on consent next time.
So if there's any, it's been recommended, if you have any questions or concerns or any changes, that you send them to Debbie.
Right.
And then if there are none, then possibly we just put it on consent agenda in 2 weeks. Does that meet with everybody's needs? Okay. Now, we have a first. Paul, I'm sorry, you're going to have to help me with your last name. When you have a name like Pisano, you pay attention to these things. So,
Thanks, Kermit.
My last name is commonly pronounced as Nadeau.
Nadeau?
I
was going to say that's commonly, but how do you pronounce it?
West Coast version is Nadeau. We stress it differently, just not to sound like we come from Quebec.
Okay, so you're NATO or Nadeau? What would you
I would
like?
prefer NATO.
Okay,
Much
NATO.
more common. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you. So we have a bunch of resolutions.
I do indeed. Good evening, Dr. Flores, board. So we have a number of items to address to the board this evening. The first is 8A, Notice of Completion for the Safe School Lock Project with Opening Technologies. And this was for the lock projects across the district, the elementary schools. Okay. And it's our recommendation that the board recommends.
Board approves it.
Oh, that the board approves the resolution.
The resolution, yeah.
Thank you.
Can we do those all at once?
why don't you do
A through, yeah,
We
if you
can
go
go
A through E, and then we can do one acceptance on a roll call.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Okay, well then, item B is for the notice for completion for the Prop 39 HVAC project with Delamora Sheet Metal Heating and Air Conditioning. And this was through the...
Throughout the district.
This was throughout the district.
Yeah. Heating
And-
air conditioning. Recommending approval.
We're recommending approval on the completion of that. Let's see, agenda item 8C is the approval resolution for, or the notice of completion for the Prop 39 lighting project with Energy Retrofit Company, also throughout the district.
Throughout the district, correct, and we're recommending.
And we recommend approval for the completion. Let's see, item 8D is the notice of completion for the Gilroy High School new math building site work project with Premier Builders.
Hey.
We're recommending that the board approve completion on that.
As opposed to, oh,
And then the final notice of completion for the Gilroy High School new math building modular phase 3 project with American Modular Systems. And we recommend that the board approve the completion of that.
board members, do you have any questions on items 8A through E?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, these are resolutions.
Oil absent. Heather Rapp.
Yes.
Mark Good.
Yes.
James Payne.
Yes.
Linda Pisano.
Yes.
Patricia Mickard.
Yes.
Jaime Rosso.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So
See how easy it is?
you're halfway done.
This might be a good point, too, that just coming into this position, I'm extremely grateful that James has buttoned up a lot of these projects the way he has. It's a very class act. I know that's not the way he came into the district. So,
Not his fault. We had.
true.
No,
I
when he
think
came in.
70 or
yeah.
80 projects that hadn't been closed out. And thanks to Jim and project managers, we were able, Mike in particular, we were able to do this. I think he said we're down to, what was it, 20? Last meeting we asked him? Or maybe less, maybe 15.
Yeah.
Yes.
Notice of completions left.
It's excellent. Well, we'll continue his good work. And I
Good.
know he's not here tonight, but I know he's watching, sitting at home, eating popcorn.
Okay, 8F, approval of contract with architectural systems for the ADA gate install at Gilroy High.
This is required by that DSA.
So this is a requirement from the DSA, and this is for the entry gate at Gilroy High into the pool area.
Parking lot and the pool area, yeah.
Yeah, from the parking lot to the pool area.
Now, these don't say, they're all actual. Questions? We want to go through all of these?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, we'll do the same format then.
Okay. Then, let's see, item 8G is the approval of the contract with MJR Electric to place exterior lighting on the Gilroy High School new bath building.
This is a safety issue.
There were some areas on the back of it that weren't lit, as I recall.
Right.
The facilities meeting.
Right. Out toward looking, if you were looking at
Towards the
football.
practice field.
Towards practice fields.
Yep.
Excellent. And let's see, 8H is the approval of the contract with Kimley Horn for the circulation traffic study for the Brownell School renovation project. This is also part of the due diligence, and it's required for the project to move forward. Let's see, item 8I is the approval for the contract increase with RJA for survey services for the Brownell Middle School renovation project.
The scope has changed. The
So
scope
this
has changed.
Yeah, the scope has changed, and that's resulted in a 18,183
Increase. Right, to make it to a total of 37,133.
The total on this will now be $37,133.
What the scope changed?
I think it just, the scope was enlarged. They just made the scope of the work enlarged.
But it was directed by the district, so
Right.
we asked them to expand the scope.
Yes.
To what?
I can't tell you.
I can't vote on it
Due
then.
to additional expenses, including utility locating services and supplemental topo survey.
Well, topo will do
I'm
it.
sure it's because we
Utility
have to do
locating
it.
Services and supplemental topo survey.
Okay.
But if you need more, we'll have to
I'm just
bring,
wa-
we'll
I'm
have
just
to
wa-
bring it back.
I'm just wondering why it wasn't anticipated initially.
I can't answer that. We'd have to look into it.
Well, if you look at the paperwork where it says optional tasks, following services are not included in this cost, but can be provided at an additional cost. So it has to do with traffic, right?
Yeah, it's all about that. So we must have asked for it, but we'd have to call Jim and ask him.
So, any other questions on that, or do you want to, what's your pleasure on that? Do we want to vote on that? You want to pull it?
Well, it's good to know what you're voting on when you're spending money.
It says,
Oh, it's a supplemental topo survey and utility locating.
Yeah, that's what number 3 says.
I don't know why they weren't there before, but clearly we need those.
Yeah.
I mean, we certainly need to locate utilities.
On that property? Yes.
Detailed survey at the interface between Brownell and County Annex.
Yeah.
I guess it's reasonable to locate utilities on a site that old when you're going to do new construction.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I won't
think
hold it
they're
up on
just
that
being
basis this time.
thorough. That's my guess, because on an old site like this,
Yeah.
even being thorough, we're going to discover things that
Bet we are.
we don't know about right now.
Yep.
Well, the next item
Okay.
is the same thing. It's going to be an increase. Contract increase. Look at I.
Jay? No, I is what we're talking about now.
I thought we were back on Kimley Horn for some.
No, we were on
Never
I.
mind. Don't listen to me.
So
Sorry.
now we're on J, approval of contract for architectural systems for the El Roble Elementary School interior fence replacement.
And if you have any questions about that, I would be happy to talk about it, because I asked for it.
We saw that.
I
Remember?
requested this.
Yes, you did.
Is when we paint a fence at a school, we should do the whole job. I'm not criticizing anyone, but I went on a visit, and I had a parent and a staff member point out to me that we had 3 areas that we didn't paint.
they were
the job.
unpaintable.
We're finishing the job that we should have done.
Well, and we can't paint them because they're vinyl, so we have to replace.
There was a reason. Yeah, there was a good reason why it wasn't done. We couldn't paint these, so I forget the process, but we have to do these 3.
We have to replace them.
We have to replace them.
I saw the one we went on the tour.
But it should have, in my view, when we go paint a fence at a school, we should do the whole fence, and we always do. But there was, these 3 areas were different, and they didn't get done, so.
It looks like the old Gilroy way of doing things. I'll leave that blue and put green over here.
Yeah, that's like the portables at Gilroy High. Remind me to talk to you about that, Paul.
Duly noted.
Okay, so we have items F, through J. Do I hear?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? F through J passes. Yay. See how easy that was? You're done, Paul. Don't
Excellent.
expect that in the future, however.
I'll take the reprieve. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Anna.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna.
Okay, item 9, board members' reports. Anybody have anything to report?
Ben.
Okay, hearing none. 10, upcoming new and referral agenda items. Anything new or referral agenda items?
No.
Okay, announcements. The next regular meeting of the Board of Education will be held on Thursday, November 15th. Study session will begin at 5 o'clock, followed by the regular meeting at 7. Closed session will follow after the regular meeting. That's not true.
What? Yes, it is at the next meeting.
It is?
We can't
Okay.
do it beforehand because we're having all 3 of the middle schools present.
I stand corrected. Closed session, pay attention, closed session will follow after the regular meeting. The agenda will be available on the website by 5 p.m. Friday, November 9th.
Sorry, Heather,
So-
Jaime, your last meeting, you're going to be in a closed session late, I suspect. 'cause
Remind me how
that's-
much fun this is.
Okay, we are adjourned. Lucy, you're doing a